March 8th, Pope John Paul II. Welcome to 365 Christian Men, where every day we aim to inspire and encourage with real-life stories about men. Before John Paul was Pope, he lived in Nazi-occupied Poland. Fortunately, the Archbishop of Krakow ran an underground seminary, and the future pope was able to study for the priesthood. After seminary and after the war, he traveled to Rome to earn a doctorate in theology. Pope John Paul went on to become the first non-Italian pope in more than 400 years, and he became an advocate for human rights around the world. He believed in following the teachings of Jesus, and he didn't exclude anyone. He was the first pope since the 1st century to step inside a synagogue, and he called the Jewish people older brothers. He traveled enough miles to go around the world 30 times, and he played a fundamental role in the fall of communism in Eastern Europe.
Anger surrendered to God frees a man to forgive. On May 13, 1981, Pope John Paul II was visiting with thousands of parishioners in St. Peter's Square. It was just like any other visit to the people to whom he had dedicated his life. He always made it a priority to bless his parishioners and show them God's love. The crowds cheered as he passed by, and they greeted him with smiles and waving hands. The weather was pleasant, peaks of sunlight shining through the clouds on the people who stood behind barricades, reaching out toward John Paul. The Pope reached out to them too, blessing the people. He stood in his open white car as it slowly made its way down the street. Someone placed a little girl in his arms, and he held her gently, blessing her with father-like warmth. Moments after he had handed her back, a cracking sound echoed through the air. A pop, simple and sudden, cut through the noise of people calling the Pope's name. Cheers turned into screams, and pain shot through the Pope's body. A second hit, a third, and then a fourth. His finger, his arm, and his abdomen stung his shocked body and knocked him back into the arms of his security guards. His eyes danced around to make sense of what was happening as the world quickly blurred away. Pope John Paul II had been shot. Suddenly, a man who had been standing close to the Pope darted from the crowd. Security scrambled to catch him. Women cried and screamed. The Pope's bodyguards encircled John Paul and shouted orders in the chaos. What had been a gentle breeze brushing his skin turned into a great wind in his face as the vehicle zoomed toward the nearest hospital. The emergency attendants confirmed the Pope's blood pressure had fallen and he had lost consciousness. His heart rate had slowed. The doctors decided there was a need for emergency surgery. Then, as he was being prepped, his secretary came forward and administered his last rites. As they rushed him into surgery, the doctors worked to stop the internal hemorrhaging. It turned out that one of the bullets had missed a main artery by a fraction of an inch. If it had hit the artery, he would have died almost instantly. Through life-saving surgery and the prayers of the people, the Pope made a remarkable recovery. It wasn't long before he learned who had pulled the trigger and tried to kill him. The shooter's name was Mehmet Ali Agca, who was quickly apprehended and jailed. As John Paul lay in ICU, hooked up to machines and IVs, and bound to his hospital bed, he made a decision that he would put his words of faith into practice. From his room, he recorded a message for the people, letting them know he was praying for Agca and that he had forgiven him. 2 years later, he visited Agca in prison, and there's a famous picture of John Paul leaning gently toward his would-be assassin as they sat together and talked privately. The Pope would never reveal what he had said, but what he did say is, "I forgave him because that is what Jesus teaches us to do." he teaches us to forgive. Certainly, forgiveness does not come spontaneously or naturally to people, he wrote. Forgiving from the heart can sometimes be heroic. Thanks to the healing power of love, even the most wounded heart can experience the liberating encounter of forgiveness. Real peace rests above all on mutual acceptance and a capacity to forgive from the heart. We all need to be forgiven by others, so we must all be ready to forgive. Asking and granting forgiveness is something profoundly worthy of every one of us. Ephesians 4:26 says, "In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry." Who can you forgive from your heart today? Anger surrendered to God frees a man to forgive.
Thank you for listening to today's story. Every day of the year, our hope is to inspire you with real-life stories of faithful men who have gone before us. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." Join us tomorrow for another story at 365christianmen.com.